Students, but that's what happens. While we're here tonight, before we begin, y'all, I'm Mike Mansfield. I'm going to be kind of your MC for the night and doing the interview. However, before we get started, truth of the matter is, I know we usually wait to the end of these events to pass our thanks out to people and congratulations and pats on the back. But the truth of the matter is, the one person who is most involved in bringing this all together is a young man at the end. Landon is the one who pretty much put all this together. And quite frankly, I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to say that in advance. So thank you, young man. Plus, I wanted to see him blush, quite frankly. I think it worked. We're up here tonight, y'all. Tonight is, let me start with saying people. Win Schendel is here. We're talking Leila Morrison and her young son right here, Wally Morrison. Y'all, tonight is, I guess the best way to start this is, truth of the matter, some of y'all I see, 2 or 3 times a week, and I stand up and I lecture on history and I'll tell you this and I'll tell you that. But truth of the matter is what I'm teaching is, well, my opinion, quite frankly. A learned opinion based upon years of education. But ultimately, I wasn't there about the events we're talking about. I can tell you all about World War II. I can tell you about the statistics. I can tell you how cold it was at Bastogne during the Battle of the Bulge. But ultimately, again, I wasn't there. Miss Morrison was. So, at the ripe young age of 22? 22. On the flip side, I can tell you all about Germany. I can tell you Hitler was 5'9", and he was a little different. But ultimately, I never met the man. Mr. Schendel did. Actually shook his hand at a very, very, 8?
Yeah, no, 11.
11. So you see, y'all, that's the
Not
opportunity.
11, yeah.
That's the opportunity we have tonight. As to steal a line from Miss Morrison, I teach history. They were history. They actually had a ringside seat to it. Now, the way I envision this going tonight is kind of an interview. I'll start with a little bit of background, where they're from, talk about the war, then talk about the aftermath. We'll be followed that, of course, with a question and answer session. And please don't leave at the end of the question and answer. Win would have something he wants to tell y'all about as well. So thank you for coming, and if you don't, just forgive me, we'll go ahead and start now. Oh. I'm not used to sitting down when I do these things, by the way. I kind of feel weird. First of all, Little, when we spoke earlier, you're from Blue Ridge, Georgia, correct? And what amazed me is, having been to that area of Georgia, as you can get with the accent, when I was doing a little background, I read that your father was owned a hardware store in town. Yes. What amazes me was a hardware part mortuary.
Well, he had the hardware long before he became a undertaker. That was back in the olden days, way back in the 20s. And he graduated from the school, a mortuary school in Atlanta, and he received the second license that was issued in the state of Georgia. And it was like those old diplomas, it's so big. Wally has it in his house now, of the diploma. And that was kind of unusual, but it was a small town, and they were fortunate to have a mortician there, because they didn't in every county. He was the only one in the county, and in fact, he had to serve other counties also. So he was busy, and he held on to that up until he passed away at 73 years old.
Did that have something to do with you wanting to be a nurse?
It may have. I don't know. I just know that I was born to be a nurse, because that's what I always wanted to be. And I just prayed that I had enough gray cells up here to retain enough to go to nursing school and pass the state board. You see, when you graduate, we had to take 2 days of exam. And the school I graduated from said they'd never had anybody to fail the exams, I thought, oh no. I hate to be the first one.
Pressure.
But I made it, and we had recruiters at that time. It was 1943, and the nurses were very short. We didn't even have enough here in the U.S., and they needed them overseas very badly. And I was young, 22. Why not join? You know, I should go rather than some older person. So I joined with several of my friends.
Tell them what they said, tell them what they told you. You can join or we're gonna draft you.
Oh, yes, a recruiter came out and said, if you girls don't volunteer, we're gonna have to draft you. And that would be an insult to the nursing profession. Well, at 22, I fell for it. But nowadays,
You have a picture of there right now. Your picture's over there right now. It's quite a striking picture.
It's your nursing, it's when you're in your dress uniform.
You
Oh.
surprisingly, you look surprisingly like the recruiting poster on my head. Does she not?
I've gained a few pounds.
No. Anyway, from there, I understand that, I know you went through training in the States. How did you, now, I read one of the interviews where you took the Queen Elizabeth over.
Took the what?
The Queen Elizabeth?
Queen Elizabeth to Europe,
Oh,
to Scotland.
well, we joined, my friends and I joined the Air Corps. See, it was the Air Corps back then because they were part of the Army. After the war in 1947, they became their own. So after that, they're the Air Force. You checking up on me, huh? That's right. We just celebrated their 70th birthday last year, the Air Force.
And you took the training at Lowry Field.
Oh yes, I had my basic training out here at Larry Field. And that was, we had to learn everything, not everything, but a lot of things that the soldiers learned. A lot of people have been surprised that we had to march and had to count off 1, 2, 3, 4. We had to salute. They were very strict on the salute. You had to have your hands straight, had your thumb here, and straight up and that. If you didn't do it right, you were corrected. But we didn't do any of that overseas. We didn't have time.
And then you went on the Queen Elizabeth.
Yes, I was sent to the ground forces at Camp Bowie, Texas, and had overseas training, and we had no idea where we'd be going. But one day they said, be ready in the morning, you'll be shipping out. Well, we didn't know, as I said, which way. So we got on a troop train, and we started north from Texas, and then we began to veer to the east, which we were thankful for. We thought it was easier in the European place than be in the islands with the hot sun and jumping from island to island with all the heat and the bugs. And we got to Germany, it was the coldest winter they had had in 50 years.
I'm sorry about that.
I was from Georgia, and it hurt.
Speaking of which, when at this point I have a picture of your town in Germany, because we all know, quite frankly, the things that were going on in Germany during this era. I noticed I have a picture of your childhood right there, Harpstead. Did I say that right? Where you were born?
Harpstead. Harpstedt. Did you get it?
Yes, sir. Right there. I checked up. I Googled it. And you go from there, of course, to Hanover. Okay, and I saw where you mentioned before you lived in Hanover. And Hanover is quite a large town, is it not?
Hanover is directly south of Hamburg and west of Berlin.
Yes, sir.
If you draw a line, that's the same place.
Okay. I also noticed that picture, I put it behind you. You said you were familiar with this church, or the downtown area of
From where?
Hamburg. Are you familiar with this picture to show behind you? Hanover?
Yeah, that's the old town of Hanover, which was really totally destroyed almost. And that's a castle, the church you see there, some of our relatives were married in there, but everything else, that must be an old picture, but it has been rebuilt to its original thing in Hanover, I hear. I haven't been back there since a few years ago, but it's a beautiful old town. The city hall in Hanover is a beautiful building, and I wish I could show that, but my mother worked there, and during the war and after the war later on. But that's all I can say about Hanover, which is a beautiful city with a lot of parks, excellent zoo, by the way. And I don't know sometimes who looks at who there, but that's the way I look at things.
Now, one of the things too that was...
What else do you like to know?
Oh, right there. I know, as you know, growing up in Germany in those years, you weren't given a lot of opportunity in terms of, you know, the Hitler Youth, for example, was something you had to do. Am I correct? And my understanding it was a Boy Scout, but without the volunteer. Quite frankly, you didn't get a chance to volunteer for these things.
Okay, Mr. Hitler Youth, when you're 7, you will go and you will enjoy it. And if you don't go to see your parents about it, that you will be going, and you still enjoy it. But when you get a little older, about 2 or 3 years later, you go into the Hitler Youth, and that's changed the picture. And you get a lot of discipline, actually, in marching and so forth. There has its good sides and its bad sides. Mentioned earlier, good sides, we were a lot of times confronted to build toys for other kids with a little saw, you know, some of you have used it in plywood and so forth, and repair toys. But on the other hand, we also learn how to fight. And how to fight is, we get an armband around our, but with 1 or 2 knots in there, and see how you can find somebody else to take that off, because as soon as you take that off from somebody else, that person is dead. But you know, they get back up again. In a real war, they don't get up again. And we learned that later. But it's just to dismantle, but we also had a little castle on top of a tree with a flag up there, and you had to get that flag too, besides killing all those other guys, and then you win the war. This is how we learned how to accelerate learning. And it didn't hurt in one way, but when you go into Hitler Youth, you get a little dagger. And I lost it somehow, but I got a replica at home. And ladies and gentlemen, when you live in a place like that, be grateful that you live in America. And I will talk a little bit more about it before I get through. But the thing is, this is the greatest country that's ever been divine designed, and we want to keep it that way. I also tell people if they don't like it, I help them with a suitcase and get the hell out of here.
Okay.
So that's just my positive thing for learning. And I Hitler Youth what you don't like to do. But later on, as the anti-aircraft got more and more in operation, we had to go out on the street and also pick up medals from the grenades from the anti-aircraft guns and collect them. We also had asked people who have iron fences on their houses to take them off and get them melted in to make tanks. This is the kind of stuff. Also, if this would be Nazi Germany, I probably wouldn't be here any longer because the Gestapo will be outside already and get with me.
In fact, one of the things I think is important that a lot of students don't realize, or a lot of people don't realize.
I cannot hear, my hearing is a little odd.
Okay, I can stand there and yell. One of the things a lot of people don't realize, students and as well as other people, the role the Gestapo played. I mean, that was not a group you negotiated with. I hear people say, if I wouldn't have done that, well, yes, you would have, because of the way society was structured.
The thing is, for one thing, people didn't really know what was going on. People had a chance to vote, and then they didn't take the time to vote. We have a lot of similarities in this country today. People do not take time to vote, and that's the only thing I think it can stay with you. But Hitler took away the guns and everything else, step by step. Excuse me. And so disarmed Germany from within and trained you. I still can remember things I had to repeat and to learn and to sing. I can still sing a song. It's almost here to going Schritt. You know, it's a brainwashing situation that happened by Hitler in 12 years. Thank goodness it only lasted 12 years. I don't know where I would be if it hadn't. There's other things I can cover.
Can you talk about meeting Hitler? Not many people could say that.
Yes, I'm sorry about this.
No, don't be.
At least get one today. The thing is, my dad was a doctor, and we went to a medical conference in Nuremberg, and we lived in Hanover. And when we come back, driving back, we stopped at Bayreuth, which is we call it French is the Schweiz, very similar to South Dakota. And, what do you mean, you're laughing about that?
They've been to South Dakota.
The thing is, we were there, and I don't know why we were there. And all of a sudden, the cars drive up where we were, and Hitler walks out with a staff. So my mother says, why didn't you go over there and meet the guy? I did. He stepped on my foot, and my shoe came off. It's the only one in town, probably, even in Longman and in Fort Collins. I got it there. I like this goose wine. Some of you probably know what it is. But the thing is, I shook his hand, and I still remember looking at him, and I was about 11. My mother and I talked about it when it really was, but there was a glimmer of fear somehow. I still remember that blick, that look. And so we drove off, and that was it. Later on, Hitler killed my father through the Gestapo because he didn't agree with the system, and he didn't agree with a lot of things. So they picked him up and beat the hell out of him several times. And can you imagine the Fort Collins police come in your house and beat the hell out of your husband or your wife or whatever? This is what we could face if we don't get involved in our government here and do the right thing on the right to vote intelligently. And, okay.
Ms. Morrison, it's about, while he was doing Win was getting his shoes messed up. When did you leave England to go to France?
When did I leave?
Yes, ma'am, about what time period?
That was in 44.
Okay, right after the invasion?
Yes.
Okay, now I've read somewhere that you were robbed in one of these, a big old landing ship, which
Yes.
basically is, for those who are not familiar, they're designed to carry tanks. Okay, so instead of a tank, you gotta love the U.S. Army, they put a bunch of nurses in it and ran underground. I saw that you were with the field hospital. Could you tell us what you did with the hospital?
Well, we went to England first. That was the Queen Elizabeth, the largest ship at that time. And I was in a room which ordinarily would have been a single, and there were 9 nurses in there, bunk beds. And I was the first one in. I said, oh, I'm gonna take the bottom. And my friend said, oh no, don't do that. If anybody gets seasick, you're gonna be sorry. Take it off. So we did. We made it over to England. We were there for just a short time. And by the way, we had so much respect for the British people. They had been through so much. It was such a shock because our cities had not been bombed, and the people didn't have to run to a bomb shelter. And we were told if we were invited to their home, do not accept the crumpet. You can have a cup of tea with them, but don't accept the crumpet because they're so short. Well, we tried to do that, but the British would say, oh, I know you've been told not to, but go ahead, go ahead. So one thing happened to me that a lot of people get a kick out of. We were way up in North England, close to Liverpool, just west of there. And we were, several nurses and I were walking down the street one day, and a little fellow, about 8 or 10, came up and grabbed hold of me and said, hey, nurse, are you a Yank? And I thought, oh, coming from Georgia. What am I going to say? Well, I decided it'd be too long to tell him. And so I just said yes. And I never lived it down. Everybody in my unit teased me about it forever after. But we went on to France in a small British ship across the channel and landed at Normandy Beach. And we couldn't pull up into shore because there were too many sunken ships and mines and whatnot. So we had to anchor way out there. And they had a rope ladder. Maybe some of you did. I didn't know what it was, but it's a rope ladder that they drop down from the deck, main deck, and you get a hold here and you swing down to the bottom, and a little LST met us down there with the boys. And they thought, sure, some of us would fall, but not a one of us did. But going up the beach there at Normandy was a very emotional time. I felt that it was almost sacred ground. So many of our troops, and especially on down at the Omaha beachhead, it was straight up like some of these mountains, and the Germans had a pillbox up there and had a little entryway about like that, just big enough for their gun to come out and to see. And as our boys climbed up there, they were just mowed down. There really were so many casualties. But anyway, that had cleared off by that time, and we had a good steady going across France. My hospital unit, I like to explain it kind of like an emergency room. we only took care of emergencies. We had a doctor and by the way, we were in tents. We lived in tents. Our hospital was in tents because we were mobile. We traveled forward most of the time as the troops went. And I lose my thought here a little. As we traveled on, the first tent was a small one, and there was a doctor and corps boys in there, and they assessed the casualty that was brought in. They only brought in the emergencies. If the doctor thought that this soldier wouldn't make it back to a station or general hospital, which are permanent, we'd take them. And I do think we saved a lot of lives. My tent was shock and pre-op. The next tent behind the doctor that assessed the casualty. And we gave many, many units of blood plasma. At that time, we had no way of conserving blood, whole blood. And so the next best thing was plasma. And we stopped the hemorrhages and tried to bring them out of shock to get them ready for surgery, which was right behind us, the surgical tents. And we had several units there. And if they had surgical units of a couple of doctors and nurses that put you to sleep, and a couple of nurses. And when you got real busy, they'd send in some of those so we could try to save more lives.
One of the things too, that's a nice place, I was looking at some of your pictures. One of the things too I mentioned to the students before is that you took care of the boys after the Battle of the Bulge, the Battle of Bastion.
What are some of the things the boys talked about?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. But I was talking about right after the Battle of Bastion, the Battle of the Bulge. The thing is, they all say the same thing, and it's all how cold it was.
Yes, it was very cold, especially when you lived in a tent. But it's surprising. There were a lot of casualties out of the Bulge, but a lot of fellows lost their arms and legs and, well, all kinds of casualties. But it was surprising to me anyway. Many fellows lost their arms and legs from frostbite. They said when you're standing in a foxhole and it's been snowing, which it had there, and you're walking back and forth and the snow melts and your boots and socks are wet, there's no warm socks in a foxhole. So they became frostbitten and would lose their limbs, which seemed so bad to do that. But that was part of it. Now let's see what else.
Tell them about your shower, how you took a bath at the shower, helmets in the water that you got, how your hygiene.
Well, let's see. Oh, the fellows, they were shocked at the Battle of the Bulge because there were so many Germans. They
Germans.
And they got everybody they could. And the fellas said they had little boys, 13 and 14 years old. They had old grandpas and all the equipment. See, Hitler made a mistake in investing in so many things like his cave and the Siegfried line and all that. And so they were, it was a terrible battle, a lot of casualties. But that was the last big battle that we had in Germany.
And you took care of the Germans too?
Oh yeah, we had prisoners, German prisoners. But we had plenty of our own too. But we took care of them. It was a little difficult but we took care of them just like we did our own boys.
One of the things too, I'll be remiss when we talked about this. I know you said when you got into Germany, you went over the Bethune, a Bethune bridge across the Rhine, which is kind of scary, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, no, can't say that I was scared at all. I would jump when the 88 gun, the German gun, it's a big old 88, oh, it made a big noise. And every time the one hit close, the roof of our tent would go woof, woof, and I couldn't help but jump. It was so big, a boom, and I still jump when I hear a loud crash that comes unexpectedly.
When you speak of this, so a German 88 was probably the most feared artillery piece during the war because it went really, really fast through everything it hit. So when you talk to the veterans, a lot of them will say that 88. That's really what scared them more than anything.
All the fellas didn't like that.
And it had a very, very distinctive sound. So when it, so when they heard it, they immediately died. One of the things too, when you got into Germany, was unfortunately you had to the concentration camp, Buchenwald.
Yes.
Just how was that? It had to be horrible.
Well, I forgot to tell you about crossing the Rhine.
Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
do that right quick?
Sure.
We traveled in a 2.5-ton truck. That was we toured Europe in a 2.5-ton.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, cold too. And we crossed the Rhine River on a pontoon bridge with that big old truck and the tanks and everything went over. But that was kind of scary because I don't know if any of you know what a pontoon bridge is, but it kind of gives, as you go. Well, we got over there, and before we set up our unit, they said, "Oh, get those nurses out of here, you're too close, you're too close." So we had to go back. We were at Firms at that time, and so we had to wait a day or so, and then we crossed the Rhine again on another pontoon bridge a little further west of there. But we made it, and I just thought that's such an unusual thing. I'll never forget that pontoon. And it was cold, and I thought, oh, I sure hope we don't have to jump out of this truck.
And tell them why you weren't scared.
Oh, I wasn't scared. I really wasn't. A lot of people ask me that, but I thought if I were the patient and there was a nurse waiting on me and she was scared and shaking, I don't know if I'd want her to be giving me IVs or intravenous or intermuscular. So I tried not to show that. And I knew that we were going to win the war because we were a Christian nation. And I knew we'd win it. So I never worried about it.
Good.
Yep, that's right.
Now, Buchenwald.
Oh, yes. We were ended up down in Czechoslovakia. And we had fewer and fewer casualties. And we were sitting down there supposed to meet the Russians, but the Russians didn't show. And the average GI doesn't sit still very well, kind of like my son. So they said, "Oh, let's don't sit here and wait for them, let's just go to meet them." So that's what we did. But we had far less casualties than that, because see, we had VE Day. But most of those casualties were fellas cleaning their gun or doing something like that and get a little careless. And then we were the troops. They told us we'd just been there almost a year, and they said, you're seasoned troops, so we're sending you home first because you know what it's like, and you're going to get 30 days more training of the islands in the Pacific Theater, And then you ship out for the invasion of Japan. We were supposed to go in on Honshu Island, D+2. And we were so thankful and so glad to be home. We really didn't want to go again. And we were teasing among the nurses. We said, let's cut off that much of our little finger, and then maybe we won't have to go. But we didn't mean it. We went. And they sent us on up across Germany, coming back to France to get a ship to come home on. And we just happened to be close to Weimar, Germany, where Buchwald was. And that was the largest concentration camp in Germany. And our troops went through there, and there was a young man that had been a prisoner there for quite a while. And the next day he met us, and oh, he was so happy. He was smiling so big. And he said, oh, those Americans are so wonderful. He said they had their big tanks. They came in, they knocked that fence down, and they had a barbed wire. It was an iron fence, and a barbed wire about that big. And he said they just knocked that fence down, and they said, you fellows are free. You're free. He said, we're free. We could do what we wanted to. And I'll never forget the look on his face. He was so happy, and we were happy for him. And we met a man from Czechoslovakia that had been a prisoner there for quite a while, and he wanted to take us through and explain it. Do you have time for that?
Yeah, if you want to.
Well, I'll tell you, I stood there and looked at it, and the things that he showed us changed my life. I'm like Ben, I'm so thankful to be an American, because it had to be terrible.
Me too.
Yes. This man said the only reason he was alive was because they pyramided the bodies. You older folks will maybe remember some of that. They pyramided the bodies. And he said he was in the middle of one of the pyramids, and SS troopers would come around every day and use their bayonets and into the pyramid. And if you moved, that was your last move. And of course, he took us all through the crematory, told us how they treated the people. If they told you you were going to have a shower, that meant goodbye. Because you never got the shower, but you went up into the ovens after they hit you in the head. And we went upstairs to the crematory, and it was just very modern, very clean, and there were 8 ovens on each side, and 2, like 16, 8 here and 8 there. And they had a whole wall there full of ashes, and I don't know why they kept the ashes, but they had that whole wall full of bottles of ashes. I don't know if they had kept the name or not. And we saw a lot of people that there at Buchwald, they did a lot of experimenting with drugs. And they tried drugs on humans. And oh, if you saw those people, I'll never forget that. You hear of skin and bones, but I tell you, it was bones with a little bit of skin. Oh, how they ever survived, you don't know. And then they had down the way, a little ways from where we were standing, they had the trenches. And they had so many bodies, you know, that used a bulldozer and just pushed the bodies in the trench. And we saw that, but I'd seen too much already. I didn't want to go walk. There's a little walk down there, so I didn't go down there. But I tell you, people, that was something that changed your life. I sure agree with Ben. If you're an American, we don't realize how thankful we should be. If you want to get in the car and drive down to Denver, you can go. You don't have to go through headquarters and get a pass and all this, or maybe you don't pass the test and you may lose your life. But that's something that and the rest of Buchwald, where the prisoners lived, was where the people that ran it, it was very modern, very nice. And they had an underground there, just like a little village down underneath in case they were bombed there.
That would be, because when you went through the bombings, did you not? You went through numerous bombings in Hanover, did you not?
It's a what?
Numerous bombings when the aircraft flew over bombing Hanover?
Yeah. See, I'm on the other side of the fence here, as we were talking about. The enemy and the friend, they're sort of like that. But in Hanover, we were first called at night, especially, to load anti-aircraft guns by the 10.5s and the 8.8 caliber, and load those things. But I had to go over there by a bicycle from where I lived. I never, it's unbelievable, the hearing aids I need now, and it's the noises and so forth, and everything else included. Answering your question?
You're doing well. The thing of it is, I have a picture behind you of the damage that was done to Hanover during the war. I know at one point you left the city and went to...
Hanover was 52% destroyed.
Yes, sir.
We had up to 5,000 people being killed at a night. And I have a book on that. In fact, I have some of the stuff with me can actually show you black and white. And when you hear the first time you hear a bomb, they say the second time that you don't hear that, that's going to get you. But it's like a freight train. I guess some people say it's like a tornado. And it's, in fact, one of the earlier air raids, I looked out and looked over the area of Hanover downtown, and there were a bunch of candles in the air, and the bomber formation were flying into the square and dropping their bombs right into those areas. We lived in an apartment building, my mother and I want to go in detail with, but the 4-story apartment building, I looked out of the window and saw this, and we were sliding down, and the bombing rate started on our area. And next to us was another big apartment building. And if you can realize when you're in your own basement, and you knock a hole in the wall, in a firewall, by the way, to the next building, we had on each side tubs with water and blankets, and to dump those blankets into the water and hang them over you and knock out the bricks who were in the wall and climb to the other building, because you don't get burned to death in your own building. Now the buildings over there are different built than here. Here they're built, a lot of them is 2x4s. Over there it's all brick and mortar and concrete. So things stand up a little bit better. But it scares the hell out of you because you don't know what's going to happen next and so forth and so on. And that was my earlier, this particular one, experience of a bombing rate. But again, as I said, they put us later on also and the aircraft guns and load these things. But then we got hit again, and we had to move, my mother and I, from Hanover to Buchwald to save our own neck. And, but there was only a circle they would evacuate you to, about 50 kilometers, and Buchwald fell into that place. And so we lived there, and the mayor of Buchwald took my mother and me, and it just so happened that he was a big Nazi official, but he was also a patient of my dad. So this is what happened. From Buchwald, we got turned off again, and then later on came to America. But I want to go back a little bit on Germany, because as I said before, if you talk to each other right here, and the Gestapo is already waiting outside. Now, in the same way, I got kind of drafted with the Hitler Youth into the later on to fighting Sherman tanks, not German tanks. That's the difference between the two words. Get that clear? And so Sherman tanks, they run around King tanks and kill them off. But if you ever look at a barrel of a tank and it's coming at you from two different directions, it'll scare the heck out of you. Even the machine guns. But the first thing when we were taken over, we were in a foxhole too, by the way, kind of with brick. But when at night the light of the sky would brighten because the front line was coming closer and closer. And on Sunday morning, it was the end of it, looks like. I saw an American Jeep, as we were in our foxhole actually, coming up the street with a trailer behind and a machine gun on top of it. Why? What happened? I drove to a certain house. They knew exactly who lived in that house. It was a Focke-Wurf engineer, training in an airplane engineer, and pick him up. But then I heard the rumble, and here comes the tanks, the Sherman tanks. I mean, I've never seen so many tanks in my life, but they're coming from two directions. And we were fired at it, and there were three of us in this hole. This was two Schroeder brothers. One was 14, his brother was 13, and I was 13. His brother in the middle got killed. And he bled to death, literally, while we were there together. And so this is, and how did we get into the army? As I said, they closed the doors on us and loaded us on trucks. And the aircraft, as I mentioned before, that was kind of more leisure, but we had to go there at night and on a bicycle actually, and get to those half loading. And I know how heavy those 88s and 8 cartridges are. In the same token, in a good way, as a Hitler Youth, we had to go through rubble and dig up people. Had to do that. Or we had to go in an apartment building and do aircraft shooting. The anti-aircraft guns, the pieces of steel come down, they would ruin the roofs of buildings. Like, they were all at those days made out of ceramic. So we had to make a human line inside these apartment buildings and carry those up to the top of the building. Too had to do that. But the main thing is picking up in rubble, finding people, and finding bodies. So I learned early in life. One across the street from where we lived in Hanover, a bomb hit, and the people had built their own bunker, and they were all dead, sitting on the side of the hole. But I've seen more people dead than I ever want to see again. But after a while, in those areas, in those towns, you get used to it, actually. Yeah, I mean, you never get used to it. It's just, how things made out to be. But one time in the Hanover area, I was on a street somewhere, not far where I lived, but some inner voice told me, and I don't know, get the heck out of here. And that's in German, by the way. And I did, and everything kind of exploded on the other end of it. And somebody was looking out for me, and I believe very strongly in a guardian angel, ladies and gentlemen. They are out there, and some of you, I'm sure, have experienced it. The thing is, this is the greatest country, and I will repeat this again. But Germany kind of recuperated from it for what happened to it. And Hitler lasted only 12 years, thank goodness. And, but his henchmen, who knows what they're doing now? I don't know, I see those pictures up there.
It's a picture of rebuilding Germany. He also has some pictures. You said you were 13 when they drafted you, as you said?
Yeah.
They brought you in. How did the Americans treat you when you surrendered?
Good point. Very well.
That's why you're here.
Come out to a meadow in a little town of Buchwald, and well fed. Plus, a lot of the Americans asked what the relatives, maybe their relatives living in town. Okay. And when we were taken over to the black folks said they were American Indians. That was kind of interesting, but I learned later on.
Yeah, it's called pulling your leg.
I hate to say it that way, but this is where we confronted it that way.
So you said something before, in terms of the Americans compared to the British. I understand you're not a fan of the British after the war.
Yeah, where we lived in Buchwald, I can go into school too, but the English took over.
Yes.
But the thing is, when the English came in, the German families had to move out. The English families came right into the German houses. And that kind of was interesting. And as we got grown older, we were not very nice, actually, with the situation.
Yes, sir.
Because we didn't like that. They did that. In fact, they built a whole town of English families east of Buchwald, and in fact, I was involved doing electrical work in there. But it was not a good feeling, actually. But it all later on changed.
Okay, what about the rebuilding? Because I know Germany, we have pictures up there about how damaged it was. Imagine something, when you have to rebuild a country like that, it has to be a total effort for everybody.
Well, in fact, I saw a lot of times where the English came in and picked up machinery and sent them to England, and another train came in and brought new stuff in. This is what happened too. Especially, I watched it actually happen in real life in the town of Buchwald. Buchwald is a town it grew probably to about 50,000, about 25 from refugees from Eastern Germany. That is another story in itself. You know, people, I still don't understand why people have to kill each other for any reason whatsoever. But it's the higher ups who like to you know, get involved in the situation. But we don't have any right to kill somebody, to power or money or whatever it might be, or even murder. But this country, again, America, is the greatest country ever was built. And I think God helped us to build America. And so many people in America have died because of our freedom. And then we got to we have to keep doing that to tell the truth. And when you lived in a German during the Nazi time, you couldn't believe anybody. You know, as I said, told a little fiddy that we don't have a flag, so we don't have to hang one out. That's terrible, you know. But I picked that up somehow and turned my own dad in. And you don't want that to happen with your own children. So, you have another question?
Yeah, one more thing. When did you come to America? 52?
Pardon?
When did you come to America?
Oh, that's a story in itself. I came over in 52, my mother and I. But it started 3 years prior to that. We went through the immigration, we went to different organizations like the FBI investigation and so forth, which lasted 3 years. Then we got the visa and then had to sell things and go on. But you had to make a decision in a wooden box, what we're going to take and what we don't. And then some of the furniture still looked today like there was a casket going down there. The furniture we had to get rid of. But thank goodness we went on a freighter, Line Steamship Company, from Bremen to Rotterdam to Antwerp to New Orleans. I'm sorry about this. But that's another awakening when you go from one culture to another one. It really is awakening. But thank goodness it's situated and came over here and was minus $600 in 1952. And minus $600. Minus $600. And nothing to show for it, except our wooden boxes with stuff in it. And I bought some cameras, which I thought I may sell. I still have them. But it's a real awakening to come to one country with nothing, but except willing to work, and I worked as an electrician. My mother was doing some house sitting, which helped her. And then we came from there, and in the meantime I met my wife, Joanne is right over there, and my daughter next to her, Michelle. And it wasn't easy at first to come to some place like this, which is the greatest thing ever happened to this earth. And I say divine created. And if you don't believe it, look what our forefathers in this country went through. Hitler was trying to do the same thing. I'm going back to that. You know, remember and some of you can, what happened at the age of 1943. Where were you? Were you born yet? Oh, you were born? Yeah. At 38, what happened then? This is how people like that in power, if you don't do the things to stand up for freedom. And we are on a threshold in this country of freedom, ladies and gentlemen. And we got to preserve this greatest nation ever. And as I said, we got to preserve it, and I say it over again, we got to get involved in one thing at least, don't be voting. And I have something I want to close with, but I don't know how are we closing.
Why don't you take a,
we got a lot of time.
Oh yeah, let me show
hope you don't
one
get too
picture I'd
hungry.
like to show of Miss Morrison. One thing you brought, then we're going to have a question and answer session right after that, because some of the audience have questions they want to ask. One of the things I want to show you is a picture I found of you and your husband. One thing during the wars, you met your husband, correct?
They're gonna ask questions.
Met Dad when you met Dad.
Oh, I met him in Texas after I was transferred to the ground forces, and we saw each other overseas. He was in the 3rd Army, General Patton, Armored Division, 13th Armored, the Black Cats. And we saw each other as we moved across Europe. And he wanted to get married, but I said no. I wouldn't marry anybody as long as we were in the war. And so that went on for the whole year over there. And so he told everybody, I went first over to Europe, but he told everybody that I chased him all over Europe. But of course, I could soon quit that. But anyway, we met when we came back to the U.S., and at that time we were supposed to both have more training and go in on the invasion of Japan. But you know, the atomic bomb was dropped. We were on a troop train coming in, and some little boys came by and waved at us and said, hey, did y'all hear about the big bomb that was dropped? And we said, no, we didn't know anything about it. And they said, oh yeah, the U.S. dropped a huge bomb that would just wipe out a whole city. And we didn't believe them, because we thought there's no such thing as that. And so we didn't really know the truth until we got home. We were on our way to get our orders cut for the leave. And so then he made me promise that I would meet him in Chicago after I came back. And so I did. My 2 sisters and I went up, and he wanted to get married right then. No, war was still going on. Still a bad war with Japan. And so about that time that the bomb was dropped, and we enjoyed VJ Day, Victory in Japan. And so I didn't have any excuse then. So anyway, we were married for 65 years, a happy marriage.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you, it was wonderful. We had a
One question
wonderful
about that.
marriage because we could talk to each other. Other people didn't understand, and they say, oh, my grandpa was over there and he would never talk about it. Well, we couldn't either, because you didn't want to remember all that. And people just didn't understand it anyway. So we had each other. I know the kids would say, well, Mom, you and Dad never talked about the war. We did, to each other, because they wouldn't, but we were mighty happy to be here, and I have been ever since. More than happy. Thankful every day. And it's a great country. I
Well,
wouldn't
who
want to
outranked
trade it for anybody.
who was superior rank, you or your husband?
Who was the highest ranking in the Army, you or Dad?
Well, he outranked me just a few days.
But still.
Yeah, but I didn't pay any attention.
Now, one of the things too, if y'all don't mind, while we have you up here, I know it's getting a little long, your voices are cracking. Is there any, if anybody in the audience has a question or anything would like to ask you directly? If you do, please raise your hand, and Dr. Gustav will come to you.
I really don't have a question, but I just wanted to make the statement that Leila was just announced that she's going to be awarded the French Legion of Honor Medal, which is the French government's version of our Medal of Honor, and she should receive that next month.
Thank you, Brad.
I do have to say, received several honors. And the only way I can accept them is thinking of all the fellas we took care of that would like to be here, enjoying all the things that we do. I'll never forget them. I can still see a lot of their faces. And when I do receive an honor like this, I'm so thankful for them, because freedom sure isn't free. It's paid a great big price for it, and I'm thankful.
This question is for Mr. Schendel. When you were applying for American citizenship, did they investigate your work in the Hitler Youth, and was that held against you even though you were a teenager, that you had been in that organization?
I'm sure they did, but I didn't know about it. But it took, how to even get the address to, that we have people living in America was showing itself to get this from some people in Germany. Then, and after that, I started writing letters, and you know, the next thing to get a care package, and I don't know what was in it, but it looks like schmaltz was in there. It was Mrs. Tucker shortening, and I thought it was kind of schmaltz, and I put it on bread and put a little salt on it and eat it. But there was a red tie in it, and I don't know what the red tie was there for, but there were all kind of other food in this big box, and it kind of helped us, because we got to the point where you have to make a living to live. And you do all kinds of things, ladies and gentlemen, when you get hungry. I got shot at by stealing strawberries in the field. The farmer. Later on, they built this little London, all for all English families on the same ground. And then he also jumped trains to take off coals, because in those days we didn't have central heating. We had one oven and so forth, and cooking with it and all that. And I lost one of my buddies. He lost both of his legs, cut off by the train rails, fell in between the cars, rolling cars. And all kinds of things to survive. I can tell you right now, I can cook, my wife knows, potatoes all kind of different ways. And I sometimes like to do it just to remind myself of it. Another thing, earlier I mentioned about putting these coats over our back to, and the reason for it in the basement when we got bombed is for us to breathe through the blankets. And later on, and I still have it as a remembrance, I made tailor made a coat out of it for me, a winter coat. I never wore it, but I took it with me as a remembrance of the. But this country has everything to offer if you want to take it. Because some people take it the wrong way and some people take it the right way. But it's the greatest place, and to continue answering your question on the investigation. My mother was investigated too, besides me, and we had no problems with that. Again, it took 3 years after coming over here, and I told you a little bit of our story already. It took 4 years to become an American citizen. And also, give me that. This is the diploma that I became an American citizen. And I have it hanging in my office. Then I have another booklet here. My mother and I went to a school at a Veterans Administration for 1 year, 1 night a week to study about the American government, then take the test to become a citizen. Then I have another book here where the Nazis requested for each family to go back in their tree of life, in their family tree. We had to prove to the government, and right in here, this is an empty page, but we right here you see the Nazi emblems in here, that we did not have up to 1/8 of Jewish blood in our family. Otherwise, they probably sent us to the concentration camps too. This is how deep they went into families to find out. So, oh, I'm sorry. I get carried away, as you probably can tell. But, you know, it's still, I'm glad you kind of talk to us and listen to us and are sharing our ideas. We only want that we can sell America to Americans, right?
Right.
You and I.
Yes.
We are getting up in age, and I'm 87, and but I don't feel that way, except some days. When everything hurts, I see I even have a wound up here. Put this back in here. But this is very important. The importance to be an American citizen. What you have to do, what you shouldn't do. Of course, not rob people, but things like that. But we also, in a way, get robbed by not in being involved in our government. And it's you know, you look at some of those older films, how America was founded. How many people lost their lives to freedom and live that way, that we can live today. And I'm sure the veterans, a lot of them have given their life for this country. And here we are. Now, there are even some places where you cannot even display the American flag, by the way, and even the Christian flag either, because somebody doesn't like it. I have our flag, American flag, and the Colorado flag hanging out all day. Come in bad or good weather, I think I like to challenge all of you to put the American flag out, like and buy it. It's not that expensive, by the way. When I became a citizen, going back to that, it cost me $10. And we have this picture here. I don't know which one that is. My mother and I became citizen in *56.
It's right there. We have it up there.
Right there.
Well, I thought it, there you
Yeah,
go.
that one. That's my wife on the right and our mother on the left. And our son are holding up, who is now 64, by the way. But he doesn't talk to us.
Now, we also have another question over here, if you would like to have something too as well, another interested person.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming so much. It's been so wonderful to hear your stories. I just want to know,
I can hear you.
when did the transformation in your thinking take place? Because I can imagine as a young 12 or 13-year-old that you think we're on the winning team, this is right. But somewhere in the process it changed. You realized this wasn't what you thought it was. How did that take place?
It really came to place as I guess getting older. It something wasn't right, plus some of the influence from my father and mother. My father and mother actually separated, but it was during the war, and it had a lot of influence on me because I did get involved in certain organizations to learn the other way, and especially after the war, to reaffirm that I was very active in the Lutheran Youth Movement and in the volunteer fire department in this little town of Buchwald, and which is about 50, if you look on the map, it's about 50 kilometers west of Hanover. And it has a real nice castle in there and everything. It was great to live there. But when the call came to leave, again it was a divine feeling to come. And some people asked me, why did you come? It just came about it. And the feeling as a challenge, and of course we started as nothing when I came here, absolutely zero. But if you put your mind to it and guidance and listening to what God may has to tell you, and be quiet and listen, things do happen. We have a nice family. We have our daughter here. Rochelle, stand up, please. I said stand up, please.
I'm going to rest with any more family members. Does anybody else have any questions you would like to ask? Here's one question, sir.
Yeah, hi there. Thank you again. So is there anything you guys would want to say to the younger generations who's only known peace, that we haven't been through such patriotic war? Would you let me repeat the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything you would like to say? Is there anything that you would like to say to the younger generations that have grown up in such a time of peace?
Anything I'd like to say about my
Yes, ma'am.
Well, yes, I grew up just like most of you, only it was back in the dark ages. I'm 96, and I just took America for granted like everybody else. I think you have to be without before you really appreciate it. And I would like to tell you that Vin was talking about the flags. The flags over here are German flags that flew over Germany during the war. As we went across Germany, everything that had a hole in it, a window, a door, or anything, it had a Nazi flag out, as you see. And that this is two of them over here. And because I'm sure that some of you have never seen a Nazi flag, but these actually flew over Germany.
Anybody else have any more questions? Please, in the back.
Yes, I just had a question for Mr. Schindler. In earning citizenship, and that looks like it could possibly be either a Sable Texana fan palm from Texas or a palmetto on the East Coast. Where was the citizenship earned? Where was this located?
That's in Houston, Texas. That's in front of the courthouse. That's in front of the courthouse in Houston, Texas.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's where it is. That's, you see the palm tree, right?
Yes, sir.
That kind of guides you. It's warm there. Warm and humid, and that's the reason I don't live there anymore.
We have a question in the back.
Hi, my question is for Mr. Schendel. So my grandmother was actually a young girl in Germany during the war and came to the United States. and she struggles a lot talking about it and has for as long as I've lived. So what kind of prompted you to tell your story and talk about it so publicly and
Grandma
open?
grew up in Germany during the war, and she has a hard time talking about it. So, what makes you talk about it?
Your grandmother grew up in Germany, you say.
Yes, sir.
It's different at the time. Probably certain changes have happened in the meantime. Have Americanized over there too. I've been back for about 3 times. The generations in Germany like that, and as I remember it, one generation takes care of the other one. A lot of generations live in the houses of the whole family together, which I don't see much of in this country, that family taking care of each other as they get older. By visiting around and asking questions, even people I work with, some are very good and some are worse a hoop, because we have to take care of each other as we're young or old or young. We take care of babies when they get little and don't send them out there and go get them. We take care of our kids before they leave the nest, With the birds, they get kicked out. But as a human being, we do it easy. I'm glad that in our family, we just lost a son. He was 61 years old in Hawaii of cancer. And it just kind of makes it kind of sad. But what can you do? If you look at the man and say, he looked at you and said, "Dad, maybe can you help?" And you can't do anything about it. But this is, I think, we need a foundation in this country again, and not made by war or bombs or this or that, from within. It has to come from within. And I know we got people out there telling us this and that, but it has to come from within, from right in your heart. That's where it comes from me. Because that's all there is. That's all we got. We cannot even take anything with us, by the way, I want to tell you. Some of the billionaires and millionaires can take a dime with them. I have an electric train now, I want to see if I get a train with me. But the thing is, it's just we can only improve our soul as an American. And it's a privilege to be an American. And we have to honor that. This is a privilege to have a driver's license, by the way. This picture you saw, it's actually my driver's license pictures in Germany on the little leaflets.
Ms. Morrison,
Any other questions? Yeah.
Should we take one final question?
We mustn't forget how many Americans are of German extraction. And I grew up in southern Wisconsin, which was very German. They were God-fearing, they were family-oriented, they were hardworking. I think everywhere they went in this country, they made it a better place. And during the war, Green Giant had a pea canning factory in my town, and there were a lot of prisoners that worked there, and they were housed in the fairgrounds in the center of town. And on Sunday night, the townspeople would gather at their fence around the prisoner camp, and with the prisoners, they'd all sing Deutschland über alles.
Yeah, but that's taken sometimes at the wrong words. Deutschland über alles, over everything, but it's only meant Deutschland over Germany itself, not over the whole world. And I think Hitler thought it maybe over everybody, but that's Hitler wanted Lebensraum. They have that word, you know, more room for Germany. And then things got carried away. But no, sometimes I kind of, by the way, my wife sits here in the front, Joanne, would you please get up, stand up? Stand up, please.
We've been married 65 years in August of this past. For me until I found him.
We got one more question.
One final question?
Yes. I'll tell you.
Yes, I would like to go ahead and thank both of you so much for taking your time and sharing this with us. I think it's so important that we all hear your personal stories and realize that we should not take our freedom for granted, as you've indicated. My question basically revolves around basically the extreme chaos that Europe was in after the World War, the number of people that were trying to get home all over the world, the refugee immigration problem, and how that affected you. And also, thanks for not killing my father. My father was a navigator on a B-24, shot down over Italy. 4 of his crew members were killed and rest in Cuneo, Italy right now. And I thank you for basically sharing this with us. It's so important.
He's just thanking you for sharing your experience. He's just thanking you for sharing your experiences.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
Well, thank you, sir.
As a way of wrapping this up, both of these young folks up here would like to say something. And by the way, I've been called a Yank too, and with this accent, it's kind of weird. So I understand where you're coming from. Ms. Morrison would like to say something, and then we'll wrap it up with your comments, sir.
Yes, I'll just say a few words here and end up with a little life. When I came home, overseas, the only way we had to take a bath was our helmet. It was the biggest thing we had, and that lasted for about a year. And of course, we just didn't think too much about it. We were thankful. But I did tell somewhere or other, I told the children, and this son here had a lot of delight in going around our little town telling, my mom didn't have a bath for a whole year.
Well, I want to just say one thing. We, in our family, we have a lot of stories. One of my favorites is my dad was engaged to a girl named Georgia when he left to go overseas. She was from Nebraska, and her name was Georgia. Well, when he was overseas, things happened, and they didn't get back together. He met my mom, and they got married before they met either set of parents. My mom, her dad had died and just had Granny Mae, but they went to Nebraska to meet my dad's folks, and they kept calling Mom Georgia. And Mom said, well, that's okay, honey. A lot of people call me Georgia. That's where I'm from.
That was awkward when she finally figured it out, too, wasn't it?
I didn't learn for quite a while. I would like to say it's been a pleasure to be here. Thank each one of you for coming. And Vin and I have a lot in common, even though we're on the other side. We're good buddies.
Yeah, we're buddies.
Yes, and I'd like to thank Landon. He's basically responsible, I think, for part of this. And it's been a pleasure to be here and tell you the story. And good luck and God bless.
Here's another picture of Hanover, and I think it's really typical Here's a guy, this is after the war, how everything was destroyed and how they're rebuilding it. And this is that church you saw earlier, how it burned out too, and how it's all has been rebuilt. Of course, it's been 70 years, but I'd like to share something with you. I kind of thought of and trying to, and I hope not too many of you will leave because this is really down to my heart. And by the way, I have a book here that was given to us, How to Become a Citizen and What the Duty is of an American Citizen. You ought to go to your senator or House of Representative and get a book what your duty is as a citizen. We are too busy, to quote, make money, and in the meantime, it's gone. And that's the way it is, I'm sorry. But the way I have this here is my beliefs in America, and I hope you can listen as we, but I will say I, but we all can do this together. And if you want to kind of think with me, believe in America, the free enterprise and free salesmanship. We're all selling something. Even this guy sold us to come here. Right? Yeah. Where did it start? In our basement. And then how did I meet him? Through Molly here. Through Rotary, by the way. Rotary International. And there's another member of the Rotary guy right there. Stand up and you won't do it. Chicken? Yeah. Beliefs in America became great because of its hope for its independence, its love of freedom, and its faith in our Creator. I'm grateful for America's glorious past, and I'm confident of its limitless future. And I'm awed by the unbelievable present. I'm thankful that America is blessed for its existence to fight for human rights. I'm not ashamed to take off my hat or pay attention to the flag. Old glory passes by. When tears in my eyes and goosebumps all over me, I really do. The flag presents people, us American people. I'm overwhelmed with emotion, and I feel the shivers running down my spine as I feel that America, with all its freedom, is blessed to be the home of the free. I do not apologize for the lump in my throat when I repeat the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. The 13 stripes and the original colonies and the 50 stars presenting our union. Now, as a nation, are we right now as a union, as a nation? Think about it. We got to be together as a country. I'm sorry, this is the next page. I'm not embarrassed by my emotion when I hear and sing the Star-Spangled Banner, or America the Beautiful. As a citizen, I want free choice, not a free handout. I prefer the opportunity to prove itself in a career, to express myself productively and freely. All this has a price. That price is responsibility. I must work hard, I must be smart and plan well, I must be sincere with others and understanding their freedom also. I must take pride in the presenting of my country and must have the courage to excel in my conviction in the freedom to get more in this country. An old-fashioned American, I really am. American by choice, and study it in details, as I said before, for 1 year with the American Legion. Taking tests as we were going along all the time, and then the final test was the study book I showed you earlier. The guy asked me, open it up, and he said I would ask questions, a couple, 2, 3 questions out of this. So there was no cheating. That was, but we knew it well, and we had taken tests right along for the different parts of the country. But I think we learn a lot more about our country right now, aren't we? America lives in the heart of every person, everywhere. We wishes to find his or her career by choice, by a commitment to stand up for. America is also a word of an attitude. A for attitude. Can it apply to them? I love America, I believe in America, the greatest nation ever conceived in liberty and dedication, and the only nation that holds that all mankind is created evil. What did I say? Equal. You see, you have to listen.
We got you.
No nation on the face of the earth has ever given so much to so many of yes remaining stronger for the generosity to help other nations. The Statue of Liberty stands tall, rebuilt over Manhattan to salute, to welcome the masses of the world. Such compassion comes only from people who love and care for the progress of this world. When I was came over on the freighter, my mother and I, for 3 weeks, and we landed in New Orleans, and there we are, standing on the wharf of the Lifeline Steamship Company, and nobody there. Which scared the heck out of you. But one thing, and still remains with me, we put salt crackers in our pockets, so we had something to eat, and I still like salt crackers. Now I live a little bit better, we put butter in between. Make your life reach out to others. That means also your neighbor. Make your life stretch out in your career for an opportunity of your life for you, your family, and the community and our country. May God bless America and all the people. Nothing is impossible, only people who think so. America, the impossible dream. Amen.
Okay, after this, if you guys want to come and talk to Win and Leila, you're more than welcome to. I'm going to kind of talk about what I went through to make this kind of happen. So, after I met Win, probably, how long ago was that? Year? 2 ago, maybe? Year ago. I met him at Rotary. I was like, you know what, this would be kind of a cool idea. I know Leila, and then I know Win, 2 opposite sides of a war. So I would ask different professors, different people about this, and didn't really catch traction. People didn't realize the importance, I guess. So then I went to Mike about it, and he was like, oh yeah, like this is big time. So he's like, let me direct you to Robert, the head of the history department. So I went and told Robert about Leila, and he loved the idea of just Leila. And then I mentioned Win and told him how he was part of the Hitler Youth and it's about Hitler, and I could see it in his eyes. He was like, oh, this is good, we gotta make this happen. So that was probably about 2 months ago, and now we're here. Leila, I met, I think I was in 8th grade, I met Leila through Wally. I used to work for Wally, so.
Still do.
He still do, I guess. So I met Leila, and she was like the most amazing woman ever. Every time I go see her at the Good Samaritan, where she lives in Windsor, she'd always introduce me to people. People would come up and say, "No, is this your grandson?" And sweet little Leila would always go, "Well, no, that's my boyfriend." And they'd always go, "What?" She's like, "Yeah." And I'd always say, "Yeah, she got a good one." She'd go, "No, you got a good one." I don't blame her.
Only 75 years older.
Age is just a number.
That's all.
75.
If I was her age, I'd for sure marry this woman.
Only 75 years older.
I don't see what the problem is.
Y'all starting to weird me out here.
But no, you don't see people like Leila and Win anymore. Everything that Leila had to go through, and the fact that you see how humble she is. She has no hatred for anyone in this world, when she has every right to. And she gives speeches all the time, and is so loving. And the same with Win, right? It's so easy for someone like Win to, that happened in his past and go on with it and never talk about it ever again. And the fact that he can come out and say, "This is what happened. I didn't agree with it, and this is why I moved to America and I love America," I think is pretty cool. So you guys are two special ones for sure. Let's give a round of applause.
Listen, I'd like to wrap this up by saying, first of all, I appreciate your attendance, appreciate y'all showing up, thank you. But more, appreciate y'all's patience for coming here, okay? So you get an opportunity, again, to hear history from people who saw it firsthand. And unfortunately, we kind of forget that sometimes. So please take the time. If any of y'all have anything you'd like to say to them, they're graciously going to hang around for a few more minutes. So, but again, thank you very much on behalf of the History Department, on behalf of these folks, on behalf of Landon. Thank you for coming tonight.